helicopter, on speeding. I pull off the side of the road, and it's this big, huge, bright light. And I didn't hear you could hear the crickets. You could hear the whatever is out there in the desert.
There's no motor.
No, nothing. No,
There's
no,
engine.
no.
Nothing, I know.
And it stayed there for a split second, and then it was like, poof, gone. And I tell you, it shook me up so bad that that's when I decided, whatever it is, maybe the military's testing something out. But that wasn't a helicopter, and I don't know what it was, but I'll tell you, it was scary. So, that's when I started believing there is things out there.
Well, now, and there is a secret space program that's been going on. Obviously that's where, the trillions, the $600 screwdriver and the $1 trillion, missing money, et cetera, where it's went. There's been this, and now, there is, in my guesstimation, I believe there's just as many of ours out there as there are of theirs. And there's my uncle cataloged 105 different species that he actually had known about that had been visiting here, and that's what he knew. And that actually correlated with a Russian study too. So there's some correlation there. So again, when you're looking up at like yourself, okay, well that's unless you see, unless you see extraterrestrial, actually, aliens, which a lot of people have. Most of the astronauts have. Most astronauts have either. Cooper actually seen, aliens. There's been, if you go through and you listen to what they say, most of them had experienced unidentified flying objects up in space and what have you. So there is that, and I grant it. I get it. As far as that, not every one of those things, but what I do, in fact, I had a sighting about 3 years ago down in Mexico, and it was almost like yours. The only thing is, telepathically, it was communicating with me. I was at 4:00 in the morning. I was picking up my brother-in-law from the San Diego airport, so I drove there, and there was something in the sky, and there was this bright, very light, and actually was sweeping lights. And I said, okay, what is that thing? And I kept looking at it, and the more I look at it, the more I was sensing that it was sensing me, and it came right over to me, and I pulled over. I was in my car, and I pulled over, and I just sat there, rolled down my window, and looked up, and it sat right on top of me. And again, no noise. No noise, no nothing, just, it was just that. And so, I don't know. Could have been a military. Well, sure, it could have. I doubt it, but it could have. So at any rate, that's kind of what, that's kind of what, you have to come to the conclusion is that, sometimes you just don't know who or what they are, but like yours, that sounds like one of theirs.
Yeah.
I would bet dollars to donuts that it was one of theirs.
Well, probably what happened is when they hovered over us till I pulled over and I got out of the car, they probably saw me and they saw my wife and no, they're not, they won't work. And they took off. They probably saw my wife. They probably saw my wife and they just wanted to get away fast as they could.
I know. It's. I was on I was on a show. It was Eminem's radio show, and they have a satellite broadcast. Anyways, I'm on there, and this black guy who is one of the hosts, personalities. He goes, E.T.'s prejudice, and I go, and I go, you need to do a little research, dude. And he goes, what? He goes, well, Barney and Betty Hill. I said, they're the interracial couple that got, picked up there. I said, they were one of the first. So, I just kind of laughed at it. The other joke part I got was the other person. I said, well, how do I get picked up by one? How, and I said, well, first of all, you really don't want to be picked up by one. You probably don't. But I told him what I do is I go out in the desert, I pray, I sing, and I stand on one leg, and then I wait for them to come, and picked me up, and he goes, well, what happens if that doesn't work? I say, I change legs.
Hey, I want to I want to backtrack though for a second. When you, for those years that they were examining you, do you remember what they did to you? Any of it at all? I mean, you know.
Yeah, well, they were probing. They were taking fluids out of. They were doing spinal taps. They're taking fluids out of my nose. They're taking fluids out of my eyes. They were doing a whole medical thing as far as that. They were researching that, and they were that's what they were doing. You know, and which is, again, I refer back, you know, to some of the research and that systematic recording of medical information of humans, or, you know, that they were watching. They were looking for data information. One of the things too, and this is, you know, the big question that comes up, well, why you, why me? You know, that's the whole thing. I mean, I don't know if it's by chance. I mean, you know, I really don't have all the conclusive answers, but one of the things to I just kind of settle on is that, you know, us being these mammals with this divine essence in us, that I think there's something extraordinarily special that we have in ourselves, and I don't know whether it be on a soul level or there's just some mechanism that they seem to be intrigued about. And I think that there's been a lot of, and in some cases there's been some very, very macabre events that have occurred, you know, including, forced, forced sexual relations, you know, this inbreeding, et cetera, you know, and extraction of ovaries, of sperm, and all of this stuff.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, is there, you know, who knows? There may be, you know, 5 million, you know, children I've had that I don't know. Maybe I'll meet one day. That they extract. I mean, so yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that's one of the things too. But actually, the last one that happened was a very traumatic experience. Was I was swinging on a swing, and in my backyard, and I had that whole sense of them, you know, of their presence, and that whole telepathic communication. And they said, yes, you need to come with us. And then they started to pull me with in the swing, and I wouldn't let go of the swing. And so I went vertical with my legs in the air, and I hung on for dear life, and literally said, no, I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not going. And for some reason, either the resistance, I doubt that I could out physically do this, but I think just the resistance was enough to, and hopefully my thought is there might have been some other benevolent, species that said, hey, you're not doing this. And so that was the last one I had, and that was about age 10. So, so at age 10, that was it. And then I never had any direct contact with them, other than in ships or in sightings, and which have been pretty regularly most of my life. I've always bumped into them, and they call it the abductee antenna, which I've also, going and talking to endless amount of people, is that once you get, something happens to you, once you see it, you're more likely to see it again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And so there's some sort of mechanism that happens. And so that's that's the idea of why, and why in families also too, there seems to be a thread of a lot of, family abductions, and multi-generational abductions too. So, which maybe go into the whole research and the whole thing. I mean, I guess, my contention now is we're all star-seeded anyways. I mean, obviously, there's been enough science that we're not, that we came from somewhere else also. So from this grand experiment. So, it's not too far-fetched. The thing about it, and this is what amazes me, and this is how fast things are moving over the last, I guess 5 years ago. I wrote the book. I copyrighted the book in 2012. or so, 2012 or 2013. 2013 was copyrighted. And things have gone so quick. And I mean, whereas before it was a little bit, people, they weren't laughing, but they weren't. But now all of the things that I have often wondered about, that my uncle couldn't answer, which incidentally, he was a preeminent expert on all of this stuff. I'm seeing they come full circle. Now it's almost acceptable. I think we went from 42% of the population believing that, there's people in other, galaxies, other places. Now it's about 62%.
Well,
so those numbers huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too. I think it's really strange. I mean, there's been since probably the 40s, the Buck Roger, serials and all that stuff. But it seemed like in the 60s, 70s, and now it's just crazy about, all these different, space shows, traveling the universes. And it seems like it's more and more shows and more aliens. And sometimes I wonder if some of it, like the government has contracted the, producers and the film companies to make these type of movies to get people, to be more conditioned. So when it ever does happen, I mean, let's face it now, because of the internet. I mean, if somebody sees a UFO and gets a picture of it or what have you, it's out everywhere, all worldwide in a matter of seconds. Back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, even in part of the 80s, I mean, there was no internet. The internet didn't really happen to about 1990s. So, I mean,
right
now, I mean, if something happens, they can't control it like they could before. I mean, they can't debunk it. But you know what really scares me, honestly? There was an old, and I mentioned this too in the last couple of weeks, there was an old Twilight Zone series or episode where a UFO came down and they acted really nice to men. They handed them this big book. It said to serve man. And they were taking, humans on the spaceship, and they were telling them they were taking them to this beautiful planet. And this one scientist and his group were trying to read the book, but it was in, that alien's language. And they were trying to break the code. And he decided, they asked him to come to their planet. And he, as a scientist, he said, yeah, I can learn a lot. As he was just getting on the spaceship, his assistant come running real fast and said, don't get on the spaceship. We broke the code. To serve man is a cookbook.
It's a cookbook, yeah.
A cookbook, yeah. So they were.
Yeah. No, yeah. There seems to be something. Let's go from 1 to 100.
Okay.
As far as that whole thing, 1 to 100. In either way, somewhere in between 1 and 100, there's the truth or truths. And one of the things, one of the aliens that my uncle had cataloged, and that they were actually man eaters. That they, as far as that. So I think, okay, that's a possibility. The majority of them are benevolent, and there is a war up there, and you get these various rules of engagement of coming to this planet, and I think that it's fairly regulated. That as far as that with the my uncle called them the Council of Seven Lights. There's also the Council of Nine, and there is this intrigue and interest in this planetary and us as a people. So I think that yes, it is possible, as far as that, and incidentally, in the whole universe, just there's nothing that's all good. There's darkness, there's light. You're gonna run into all kinds of people, including ignorant species of aliens that really wouldn't know what they were doing. That they would even deem it as wrong or whatever. So I guess you could go the whole gamut. But on balance, there seems to be this guiding hand that is this protective influence. The other thing too is I keep thinking about it with all the technology that they've had, and everything that they can do. Everything they could do, they could actually, I guess, neutron bomb us and kill us all if we wanted to. But I don't think that that's their mandate. I mean, I just don't. I don't believe it, because I think if they wanted to take over this world or could, they would have already done it.
Well, I hate to say it. You know how we go out, right?